Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining our second session on lead and revenue attribution. So for this call, we're going to be focusing on going to a bit more of the detail about how we apply some of the things that we discussed on our last session around lead and revenue attribution. So we'll be showing you some different tips and tricks that can be used across all different versions of HubSpot, all levels of subscription, so that you can get the most out of that and get this very valuable reporting out of your system so you can use that in all of your metrics and so on. So as before in the session, we've got Guy, who's going to be taking us through some of these ideas. And then when we get towards the end, I'll take a look through any questions that have come in the chat over the course of the live session today. And when we'll get some of those answered when we have time. So without further ado, I'm handing over to Guy.
Thank you, James. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today in this second part of the lead and revenue attribution in HubSpot. There are a lot of things you can do in HubSpot to get a lot of information from your leads, where they came from, what they're doing, what channels are driving you most revenue. And today, the idea is to show you a very specific way, a custom way, so you don't need to be an enterprise tier, for example, to use it, but it's really helpful because it can be adapted to your business necessities. So let's first try to give a little bit of a recap of what we talked last week. So the attribution, basically, according to HubSpot's product team, it surfaces which interactions a person or a group of people took along their journey toward a desired outcome or a conversion point, which could be buying your product, paying for a subscription, downloading any material, watching a webinar just like this one. Any of the conversion points can be analyzed in this whole journey that the client had between discovering you and then reaching out for the conversion point that we set up. So a few things we talked on the last webinar is that there are some configurations you need to do in order to get the most out of HubSpot and to get all of the information you need. So please make sure that any interactions that happens outside HubSpot, they use the tracking, the URL tracking, the UTMs. That's the way HubSpot can identify where this person came from, and especially what are the paths this user were in before reaching out into getting to your website or your form or your event. Okay, make sure you have the amount, the create date, and the close date for the deals in place. They cannot be blank as well. And also you need to connect the deals to both the contact and company. So you will need the sales activities if they are connected. If not, HubSpot will not be able to show you data from this particular deal. And remember that only emails that you have received a reply from your prospects will be tracked by HubSpot as well. So just to remember, the deals to get this information, they need to be in a closed won stage, which means for a revenue, we need to have a closed deal, because after the deal's closed, it's when we're going to start getting the money. Okay, please make sure they're in a closed won stage. They have at least one contact associated to this deal. And again, you have the amount, the create date, and the close date in place. Okay, so let's jump to a new thing that this particular one is just for the sales and enterprise tiers of HubSpot plans, but it's setting up the default properties from HubSpot. It sounds weird that we need to set up the default properties, but this is how it works. Okay, these particular revenue properties need to be set up in your account. They will not be there by default when you create the account. Even if you paid for the enterprise tier, you will need to make them appear into your account. So this is a basic guide for you to do this. So you have to go to reporting, then reports and sales. And a lot of people didn't see this before, but you will see this new one, which is called sales outcomes. This is a category that is there's still a lot of features in beta from HubSpot, but they will appear if you have an enterprise account. So you can just select sales outcome and revenue. Okay, I'm going to show you now how it looks like inside of your account. When you enter the reports, you will see this one here, the revenue under sales outcomes. Okay. This screen should be the one that shows up in your account, which is add the properties and start tracking. So these particular properties I'm going to show you are not in place. I repeat, they need to be configured before you can see any of this information, the revenue information, and the revenue reports as well. As soon as you click the add properties and start tracking, this is what you're going to start seeing. You'll be looking at a kind of a report, the recurring revenue, which is the default report from HubSpot. And this is just measuring all of the deals you have in the close deal, close one stage, that have a close date and amount and a create date in place. Okay, you'll start seeing some information here, and I'm going to break them down a little bit for you right now. These properties that you just set up, they basically tell HubSpot what is your recurring revenue, what is the type of deal that you have. Now you can map them if they are new business, if they are a renewal business, if they are an existing business, or if they are an upgrade or a downgrade version of the last deal you had with the same company. What changes having these properties in place? Mapping renewals, upgrades, and downgrades are now much easier because you can understand whether this revenue you're getting is from an upgrade, for example. It's not a different company. You're not selling to a different client. You're just getting a different type of income into your account. So in this report right here, this is the basic one, the standard one from HubSpot. You can create another one and tweak it to your preference, but you will be able to see the new recurring revenues, which they last for 1 month. I mean, if you have a contract with someone, with a client for 1 year and they pay you monthly, the first month is the new recurring revenue. The second month until the last month of the contract, it's now going to be an existing recurring revenue. Okay, this is how HubSpot separates those recurring influx of money getting into your business. And also, if you see here, we have the lost recurring revenue as well. This could be like someone that is churning, so you're losing the client, or either for because of a downgrade. Okay, if you have plans or you have different types of products and people downgrade from it, you will see the amount of money that you're now losing from this particular moment. So this is a very insightful report, but this is a default one. Okay, you can look at it and you can understand if you're growing, where are you losing those revenues, where are you getting more revenues, how much new revenue your team is bringing to the company. So this will be useful for your company. And just for you to remember, please set up the default properties by reaching the report, then reports and sales. Okay, you have the benefit of having these new properties setting up in place, which they're different from the ones that already exist in your account. Okay, they add up to it. And just in case you don't have any deals to track, or you're just setting up the account right now, don't worry, you will look into a screen that looks just like that, saying you don't have any data to track yet. If you have deals, and you have deals in close one stages, you need to take a look in the deals to see if you have the amount, the close date, and the create date in place, if the deal's associated to any contacts, and you should be able to see results in here, okay? Unless those deals are not in a close one stage. So if you follow these basic guidelines, you should be able to look at the screen and see at least the basic report of your deals inside your account. And what are these new properties? These new properties that will show up in your account are the recurring revenue amount, are the recurring revenue deal type, the recurring revenue inactive date, and the inactive reason. So this is basically a structure that HubSpot has in place for you to understand how much money you will get in the future and when you're going to lose this revenue from a particular client or a group of clients. Okay, now you can set, for example, if you have a 1 year contract with someone and this person says, okay, I'm going to be here just for 1 year, you will have recurring revenue for 12 months. But then you can now add an inactive date, which is when this person is going to churn. And you can map this in your account, map the deal as a churned one as well. And in the reports, you would understand where this loss of revenue in particular came from, if it's a churn, if it's a downgrade. And the same goes for the positive part. So if you're getting more money and if you're making more recurring revenue over the months, you can now map them to understand whether this was an upgrade for from a customer or a renewal. This client can be just paying you the same amount of money that you were paying before, but you know that they will keep paying. So you will have some differences in the account here, knowing and understanding where the money is coming from and where the money is going to. Okay, so now we jump into a particularly interesting part. This is one of the questions we get the most from users and from our clients as well, which is how can we tweak, how can we create a custom mode, a custom system to attribute revenue and also where the leads are coming from or where their conversions are coming from in HubSpot. And now we can make it with being a pro tier in the HubSpot, in your HubSpot account, because for this particular build here, you will need the workflows to be working. Okay, you need the workflows to help you map all of the attribution sources we're going to talk about now. Please keep in mind that this is a custom system and it can and it should be adapted to your own business needs. So what I'm gonna show you now is 100% customizable. It's flexible, and I'll try to give you some examples on how to do this and what to look for while building this particular custom attribution system. So for this one, we can start very basic, and we can make it bigger, make it more complex over time. But for now, you will try to create two properties. One of them is just to map the channel. Where did this lead come from? Did this lead come from a chat conversation, an email they sent us, a phone number that they called us? Is it from a website? Or is it from an offline, a real life event? You can have an event and conferences, and you can get some contact lists. You can meet people in there, and they can turn into clients as well. So we're not only looking at the online side, but the offline world as well. And for your business, it's important that you map and that you know what are these touch points for your business. Do you have a website? Okay. Do you have landing pages? Do you have blogs, knowledge bases? Do you have downloadable resources online? Are you using social media for that? Every single one of these channels can be mapped, and you can understand where it came from. So try creating one property. I would just suggest you to call it custom attribution source, but you can name it any way you want so you can remember it in the future. And it should be at least, it's our suggestion to make it a drop-down with all of the channels you have in place. Okay, so in this case, landing pages, leads coming from a partner, chat, email, event, import, or a webinar just like this one we're having right now. The other property should account for grouping these leads into different types of efforts your company is making. So you have the marketing team trying to get some more leads, trying to bring more users to your touch points, your channels. And you also have the sales team that it's not only responsible to closing deals, to making users advance in their funnel, but also there are a lot of times that the sales team is the one that gets the lead as well. So imagine if you're in an event, in a conference, for example, and your sales team is talking to people in there, and they get in their numbers, their emails, so on and so forth. You can consider this a sales effort, okay, for your company. And you can also have a marketing effort. different businesses, they will have different lead sources. So I suggest you can call it custom lead source, because you can just, the idea here is to group people from what is marketing efforts, from what sales efforts, and understand that you can have both. It can be hybrid. Okay? You can have an event or any marketing effort that is built and is done, is executed by marketing and sales team together. So you can have them mapped inside a property. So this will group your business definitions of what is your sources, what are your sources, and what are your lead sources. Okay, so this one, you map the contacts, and on this one, you group them together to understand. Now you're starting to understand what teams inside your business are driving these efforts to get not only more leads, but customers as well. In this second part, is the second step, I'd like to separate this because this is something that people ask us a lot, how they can organize and how can they set their imports in their account. So if you go to an event and you have a list of people that went there, or they registered to your event, or you just talk to them in a conference, it's nice to have them to be differently mapped inside your account. So you're going to import this CSV file or this Excel file or a spreadsheet, and you need to have a nice understanding where they came from. Okay, so I suggest you creating these two properties. One is called event import. So it's just for the account to understand whether this import came from an offline event or just a manual import. And inside your business, you can have different names for this. You can have different definitions as well. So, but the idea here is just to differentiate between imports. You can even have one property, single one, and saying in the drop-down, event, webinar, conference, TEDx, or whatever types of offline interactions your company and your team may have in the future. After having the digital part mapped, the offline part mapped as well into properties, we will have to make them work. So the idea here is to make a first workflow that can take care of grouping all of these different users that came into different channels. Okay, so if you can identify the user on where they came from, whether from the chat, whether they sent us an email, or if they called us at our company, you need to have a trigger that will account for that. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bigger so we can give some examples as well. But the idea here is to check where the lead came from. So thing you should do is just use this as a trigger, okay? Which is, I would personally use this one as a trigger. Let me show you. I would create, oh, I'm so sorry about that. I would just go into the workflows to create a new one from scratch, okay? And it should be, in this case, contact based, because we are mapping when the contact gets created, when the contact reaches our account. And one of the triggers that can be used for this specific task is an event trigger, which is when a property, the object gets created. So when a contact gets created in your account, it doesn't matter where it came from. If it was from an import, from a form submission, from an email received, for example, you will have it mapped. So this is the idea. This workflow will start running when an object gets created. And which object is this? It's a contact, okay? So I will start by this one as a trigger. Then the idea is to branch here so you can define where this person came from. If this person came from a website, you will have to have your own set of rules to understand whether this person came from the website or not. You can map it from the URLs of your website. You can map it from different events that happens in your website, such as form submissions, such as downloadable resources as well. But using the URLs of your website is easy, is precise, and gets the job done. Okay, so try to branch this specific trigger to map those that comes from the website, those that comes from specific landing pages, those that comes from a partner you may have that sends you some leads or some prospects. if you have the HubSpot chat in your website, you can also track this as well. I'm gonna stop here for a second because the chat has something that a lot of people don't understand or don't like it, to be very honest, which when a contact gets created by a chat conversation, they usually get mapped as an offline source. Okay, so it gets mapped as an offline source in your account, and you say, oh, but that's not what I want. It doesn't explain a lot to me. This is one of the reasons we make this custom attribution, so we can understand that it came from the chat. And how can you do this specifically? Well, the chat has the ability to change properties as well. So in this case, in this particular case, after having this object created as a trigger, you will need to go into your chat flow. And after getting the user's email, you will need to add a property. Okay, you will need to change a property, which should be this property here, the one you just created. Okay, right now we're calling it custom attribution source, and you will need to perform in your chat flow after getting the user's email to change the custom attribution source to chat. Okay, this is basically what you will need to do in your account to map chat conversation. You'll still see it was created by an offline source, but at least you have this custom property, this custom source that will be mapped as a chat conversation for your own particular account. So if you branch this particular workflow to get to understand where people come from, you will be a lot better in understanding what is driving you more leads to your account. Okay, so tag them all with these values here. If they come from a landing page, you can call it the way you want, but you can tag them as L pages, for example. They come from a partner, and so on and so forth. So this is how this particular property is used. Okay, you define where a person came from. After that, in the same workflow, group the channels you want to group for your own efforts. So let's say for our business, everybody that comes from these particular touch points are marketing effort generated leads. So that's when you use the second property we created, which we're calling now custom lead source. So if they all come from any of these particular channels, you can tag them as marketing. And for us, for example, let's give it an example. If they come from these channels here, these touch points, you can tag them as sales generated. Okay, this will give you now a very precise look into your account on what channels are driving you more leads and which kind of teams inside of your company are generating those leads as well. And now, those last steps, these are more suggestions to you as well. Try to create, you can do these in one sole workflow. I'm separating these into workflows here just for a better explanation, and you can understand what's being doing, what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, so a contact gets to your website, then gets mapped as that this person came from the chat, so it's a marketing lead. Now it's nice to sync these same properties to company properties. Okay, you need to create those properties as well into the company level if you want. This is not something that you have to do to make it work, but as a suggestion, it helps a lot having the whole company using the same sources that you map the contacts. If by any chance your company uses a different type of structure for that, a different business definition, you don't need to sync these properties to the company, okay? But you will have to sync them to the deal. So now, after you mapped where the user came from, you will need to map this person into the deal. So now it's where we start using our own business definitions as well to create a deal. So you can create a deal with this new user that came in. We already have these properties in place. We know that this person came from the chat and it's a marketing lead. We can create a deal with the same information we have in the contact, or we can just create the deal and copy those properties, the contact properties, to the deal properties as well. So now what you have a contact that you know where it came from. It was a marketing generated contact. And you have also a deal that you know how this deal was originated. It was through the chat and it's a marketing effort. Okay, you have this both scenarios in your account. So in the future, when you need to get into the reporting part, you will have a lot of information to report on and to separate into different types of information to come to talk to the sales team, to the marketing team, or to even to the directory of your company. And this last step here now is when we turn our heads into not only knowing where this person came from, where this user came from, but what happened after that. Do we have a deal close? Do we have money coming in from this particular interaction? Are we generating revenue from this source? Now we're about to find out. So these are two different properties I invite you all to create as well. Okay, one, it will depend on your business, on the type of product you sell, on the different teams you have inside your company as well. But basically, you need to create a property that it will identify whether there was involvement from the sales team or not. Why is that? The idea is to separate those auto-generated sales. If you're in SaaS, for example, what's going to happen is that someone can get into your website, look at your product, put up their credit card, pay for the service, and they have the service active without ever talking or having any interactions with a human being, right? So for some businesses, this is not considered to be a sales-generated sale, okay? It will depend on your business definitions. Please understand that it will vary from business to business, but for some business, the definition is simple. If there's a human being interacting, then they map it as a sales effort. If there's not, they say it's just a marketing effort, but it can be both and it can be different for any business. So please have that in mind. That's just an example, and that can be tweaked to your preference. So having this property created will allow you in the future to understand what are the teams that are driving the most revenue. Is the sales team always involved? Is the sales team less involved than it should be, more involved than it should be? It will give you these types of information so you can analyze it, have some insights to perfect your process or to make changes as needed. And this second property here is 100% focused on the revenue attribution in a customized way. Okay, if your business have different teams making these deals to be closed, such as marketing, sales, or a hybrid one, okay, you can have both of them working together to bring this revenue to the business. Map them all. If you have more than one team, you can have more drop-down options to map them all. Why is this revenue attribution property in place? Because we want to weigh how many deals or what the proportion of the deals that we need to have human being interacting to help the deal gets closed, and how many of those are just auto-generated by the user themselves. So if you take a look at this last workflow, which is a pretty simple one as well, all we want to do here now is check if the deal is closed. Okay, checking if the deal is closed, what I would do here in HubSpot I would create a deal from scratch. But in this case, it should not be a contact-based one. You need to start with a deal-based workflow, I'm sorry. And now you can try to understand if the deal, or any of the deals you're working on are closed. So you can also have it by event, for example. when the property value is changed and which property is this going to be. So I'm going to show it to you as if the deal is closed won, can be one of the properties you can use. So if the new deal had this property changed and is a closed won deal, it can trigger your workflow so you can understand, okay, now that the deal's closed, let me try to break down and understand who helped getting this deal closed and how long it took, what was the effort we made to achieve that, okay? So right here, when you have your trigger in place, you need to branch it or just create it in the trigger, just like I did, to see the closed won deals. Why you can do this on the trigger, just like it's here, because we at this place, we don't care about the closed lost ones, okay? Because we're talking about revenue attribution. If you have a lost deal, this deal is not bringing you any revenue. So this is why we're not focused or we're not worried about tracking what happens to these lost deals in particular, okay? And there are a few ways of doing this, but one easy way is to use this property we created to understand whether there was human involvement, sales team involvement, maybe customer service, maybe a different marketing team involved. So you can have your own options in here. But the idea is to map whether they were involved in the process or not. If they were, in this simple case that it's pretty much binary. Sales team got involved, sales team did not get involved. So if they get involved, you can map them with the property that we created at the end, which is the custom revenue attribution. Okay, we want to just understand that this deal was marketing plus sales effort of selling, because marketing brought the lead, then the sales team helped close the deal. It's a hybrid type of revenue. But if the sales team never got involved, as your own business definitions, I'm not saying that this is technically not 100% correct, because the sales team, in a way or another, is always involved on the process. But try to not overcomplicate things. It's better to separate them and think about those details when you have the report in hands. So if they were not a part of this, you can tag them as just marketing revenue, for example. Or if they were the only ones involved, you can tag them as sales revenue, for example. Just like someone came from a webinar, for example, and they ended up buying. In this particular case, we said as an example, these channels are sales effort leads. Okay, so you can map them just sales revenues, and so on. So what you're going to have here are deals, closed deals that you can filter. You can make reports on it using these properties we created. So you want to see how many deals or what the proportion of the deals that the sales team got involved. You can filter by this. Or if you want just to pay commission for the teams and you want to understand how many of the deals it was a sales generated deal, or it was just a marketing generated deal, or it was a hybrid, they should share the commission. You can understand this as well by using the custom properties that you put in place. So I have just a couple of things to let you know here, which are final tips for you to make this work properly. The first one, map the channels or signals that you may get for the workflow one to work perfectly, which is this one. You will need to branch correctly to understand where the leads came from. Okay, this is important. You have to understand how to know if the lead came from a phone for an import or a landing page specific one. Okay, this is one of the tips. Second one is use UTMs. Track the URLs for better page and campaign tracking. It's important to understand where they actually came from. It's not just from any page from your website. Use the UTMs to be more specific. The other one, you saw that we created 4 properties. So use the rest of the properties that HubSpot gives you. Using native HubSpot's properties is easier, not only for future people coming into the account and working because they're already used to these properties. It's less effort for documentation, and so you're less prone to make mistakes as well. And HubSpot's native properties, they work very well. So you should use as many as possible. It does not mean that you cannot create more custom properties. It's not that. It's just that have a balance. If there's a property that you can use and you don't need to create another one, you should go with the HubSpot native one. This next tip is a business tip. Build the structure. Try to understand with your sales team, with your marketing team, and your customer service team, what are the channels that you have? What are the channels that you may have in the future as well? What you need to track, what needs to be mapped, so everyone is on the same page and everyone will understand the reports that you will build in the future as well. And as a last one, I think it's a really, really, really important one. Don't overcomplicate it. Try to just separate in groups the information you need, the channels, the deal efforts to close the deal revenue, but stay relevant. Don't try to be too specific to the point that you will start losing information because it gets so diluted into the account that you kind of get a little bit of blind to some information. So you will have blind spots because maybe there's a channel that you map that only one user visits every 2 or 3 months. So it's hard to find it. It's hard to see it in the reports. You will get a 0.000% for something that's like that. So it may not be useful for taking decisions. Okay, stay relevant and don't complicate the system that you will use a lot. And this should be a recipe for at least starting a very nice, complex one in the future, but stay and start on the basics. It helps a lot. So James and Scott, anyone there? Do you have any questions about this? Any comments?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit on the practical side. So what type of customers do you see using this, or what customers are getting a lot of success that you have?
Perfect. Well, we have a lot of success with clients that have products that can generate auto purchases. The SaaS companies, it works very well because they are the companies that are usually selling online and they do not need a sales rep, for example, to be on the process. They can have a sales team having demos with the client, the customers having meetings to explain the product, but it's not mandatory. So it's very useful for them because they are also going to travels to meet investors, new clients, conferences. So they also need the offline information. So SaaS teams and SaaS companies, they really, really, really can harness this, the power of this, but it's not only those.
Right,
Everybody
but what kind of
has a sales team.
Got it. But from the reports, what kind of decisions are they making from it? Like, I mean, in terms of your customers, have they had huge savings or are they expanding their growth? Like, what kind of insights are they truly getting?
Perfect. Yes, we've been seeing the last months actually with a few clients that they're now better at deciding what channels they're focusing their efforts on. Okay, we had some clients that were doing, for example, just live events with their customers. They were traveling in cities, they were meeting people, and they did not focus on webinars, for example. This is a digital format, but it's also considered to be sales for some of those. So what's happening here is that they're changing their mindset and thinking, okay, this is a channel we can harness. This is a channel that works for us. And with that particular client, we had the end of last year that we finished this whole system for them. They started doing webinars. They did not really believe in it, but they started understanding that this was driving 10% of their revenue, and it was just forgotten by them. So as soon as they started mapping those and focusing on bringing people to make their webinars, 10% of their revenue just was shot into this particular channel. And they were happy just that they had now a good problem of having a team just for the webinars, because it was worth doing this. And they did not know that before.
So after that, how did they decide to reinvest? Like, did they do an ROI from that report, or what kind of decisions did they do in terms of how they were going to invest into the different channels?
Yeah, this was very a nice one, because what happened with this, in this particular case with the webinars, this was that the average ticket for their deals did not change a lot, but they saw that having webinars was far cheaper than doing that, running ads. So they could set a part of their budget to running webinars now. And they understood that webinars are not just live. They have the recording for the future. So it keeps on being a nice marketing resource and a sales resource as well. And they understand that people that came from webinar, they were 50% faster in making the purchase. So it's, for them, it was cheaper. They did not know that. And it was also faster. People had the better idea of their product. They could understand it better. So they could focus their efforts here, because they could sell more and they could sell faster.
So that's an interesting thing, right? Some of my clients, they have webinars and the videos, but some use it as top of funnel and others as educational material. Were you seeing that this was mainly top of funnel information, or that people had come in from different channels and then swapped to the webinar as a decision-making channel?
This is this was a very different one, because it's a little bit hybrid. It's not, for them, was not top of the funnel. It was more middle of the funnel. It was consideration and down. But what they saw is that they were able to have their sales team not performing demos and one-on-one meetings with users, with the prospects, and they turned it into webinars to have 20, 30, 50 people in the same room at the same time, instead of having these one-on-one demos. So they used it as a middle of funnel to bottom of the funnel strategy that's now working a lot for them.
Right. Interesting. So, yeah, I have a client scenario, and I'm just wondering, that they use GP heavily, gross profit, or so instead of using revenue. So with those custom reports, can you exclude the cost of goods sold to work out the recurring gross profit rather than the recurring revenue, or is it always revenue?
No, that's also very good question, because yes, I'm going to talk about both, but for the enterprise tier, they can have this as a default feature in their HubSpot account. So they can look at the gross product and they can look at the revenue. Why? Because HubSpot will separate those into different types of deals. And HubSpot as well, HubSpot will calculate these deals and the amount of the deals by the line items, by the products, right? So the products, what they have their cost, which is, let's say, $100. But you will also have inside the product their margin. So if you sell it for $100, but it costs you $30, your margin is of $70. HubSpot will calculate that for you. So in the reports, you will be able to see the attribution, the total amounts, which are the gross ones, or you can see just the revenue, which are the margins, which is everything calculated without the internal cost as well. So you can see net worth and the gross profit in different reports, yes, but using just this system, just this custom system, you will be able to see that. Now, If you're on the pro tier that you will not have these properties by default in your account, it's a different way of doing this because, let me go here, you will be able to do that in this particularly last part of this custom build. Why? Because now you will be able to separate which team drove the revenue, but inside the report, you will have to look at your line items and see if there's a margin in the line items or if just the gross value you want to look at. You can see those together in the same report and also compared side by side. So you have both scenarios in this build.
Got it. So I had a question here.
Sure.
Do one or of the emails that have been opened or clicked influence revenue attribution, or is it really just the ones that have been replied to that have the impact? So I guess that's links within the emails.
Oh, I really love this question because particularly, Scott, I changed a lot. I mean, we improved a lot the last months. Actually, to be honest, the last few years for those who got into the first stages of the GDPR, changing the whole set of rules for the world in 2018, March 25th, if I'm not wrong. The thing is, the email clicks, personally, I would love to use it. I love to use those in driving attribution and understanding how it affects and impacts our revenue. Now we have so many systems that blocks this information that we cannot see 100% of what's going on after email is sent, that we tweaked it a little bit. And now, for example, in this particular channel email, this is just a suggestion. We can make it in very different ways. But from my understanding, this is an email that has been delivered. And I just get into there. Why? Why I'm not tracking clicks, why I'm not tracking replies or anything like that. If there's an email reply, personally, I tracked it as a sales effort. Okay, because the sales team will be the one to take this. If your business have a customer service team or marketing teams to reply these first emails, you can attribute those to the marketing team. But if not, if it's the sales team to get those, you can attribute those to the sales team. But to me, and it's just a suggestion, I will just track them until delivered. Because if you deliver the email, then you will now start tracking the customer's journey as well. Okay, you deliver the email means that you have this person in your HubSpot account. You know who they are. You will be able to see if they navigate your pages, if they navigate your landing pages, your blog, if they chat with you, they call you. So you have to have your account nice configured with a HubSpot tracking code, URLs tracking, and so on, to understand if this person that you sent the email at the first, did they do any other things? Did they talk to you through any other channels? But personally, I would stay just on the delivered part and try to see after that what happens with this particular customer, because the clicks and the openings are not precise as we want them to be.
All right. I think that's time. We're out of time for today. So thanks for all of that, Guy. Any final words?
Yes, I do actually. Since the privacy settings and a lot of internet configurations and rules are changing, people should be always looking for better ways of tracking their business attribution and sources. So if anyone needs any help doing this, we can help them build very customized attribution models. And you really should try to focus this by getting the most amount of information that you can build. Don't rely on third-party services 100%. Don't rely on third-party softwares at 100%, because you will need to build your own way of gathering this information, treating this information, storing that information, and getting information from it. So My last word would be, do not overcomplicate it and rely on your first party info, and should be good for that.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Key, and we'll catch you for the next one.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you,
See you.
everyone. See you.